Hey everyone, it's Will, Gamer Dad, with another video for you. So hopefully you've updated to 2.4.1, and of course now we have 3 banners that we can summon on. So in today's episode of Should We Summon, I'll discuss what my thoughts are on these 3 banners, and we'll go in depth into the zone banner since I know a lot of you have questions on whether or not you should go for it or not. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So, the first banner we're going to discuss is fairly straightforward. It is the Fateful banner for Hardy. And obviously, he's the only featured character on this banner. So, like all Fatefuls, it is a flat 10% chance of getting him. Otherwise, you do get a guaranteed 5-star, at least one, out of each Fateful. So, the short answer to this one is fairly simple. If you want Hardy and you have some money, 1,000 paid stones, I would highly recommend going for this. Now, the reason for that is, he is the second fire zone establisher, and keep in mind, he is a physical fire zone, so he will definitely help augment a lot of your fire teams, especially some of the more powerful physical fire attackers such as AS Renry. There's quite a few out there, so if you do have the 1,000 paid stones, I would probably go for it myself. Obviously, if you're going to whale, you'll use the normal amount of whaling and spend whatever you need to get Hardy. Also, keep in mind, Hardy is a bonus character in the auction feature in the side quest. So you will have a little bit of an easier time farming some of those, seeker points and rock required to progress in the story. So that is another consideration to think about as well. Obviously, if you're free-to-play like myself, you won't be summoning on any of these Fateful banners, and so unfortunately, this particular option is not for us. That being said, there are 2 other options that are both catered to free-to-play as well as for those with paid stones. So the first of all is the featured rate-up banner for Hardy. And again, if you've missed my preview video, I highly suggest you check that one out. I do discuss some of Hardy's moves, but again, the main thing you need to know is, again, I mentioned that he is a physical fire zone establisher. He has piercing attack, and he essentially can do stacks. He has a zone canceller just similar to Annabelle AS, and I imagine his zone canceller will be a single large attack just like AS's Annabelle's finisher, which can, by the way, I believe hit over 10 million as a final hit, and it does cancel the zone. I'm hoping that with a combination of fire buffs as well as fire resistance debuff, you can easily hit that. So he will really augment your fire team, as well as he can do physical resistance down, fire resistance down, and really augment your attack. So, there's that. Don't forget though, he is paired with AS Cetie as a banner. So this is not a single dedicated ally encounter banner. It is a split banner. And so just as a simple way to think of the math, you will have to spend about 4,000 stones to even give yourself a 50% chance approximately of hitting either the 4.5 or the 5-star version of him. And so, for those who are going to, again, spend a lot of stones to do it no matter the cost, you can definitely go for it if you'd like. For free-to-plays, I would highly recommend against it. And you'll see why in the next banner that we have. There's the third banner we have to consider, and this one's a huge one. It is the Zone series one. And so, again, I'll just share my thoughts about this one, and then we can discuss that, all the different points later on. So, first of all, this banner features 6 5-star, all of which are Elemental Zone characters. And so you can see the list below here. Hardy, Annabelle AS, of course, Claude AS, Mayumpha, Yuna AS, as well as Vena. Now keep in mind, the 4 stars or the 4.5-star versions of those are not boosted rates as compared to the other 4s and 4.5. So usually with ally encounters or featured banners, you do see those as boosted. So keep that in mind, it's either all or nothing for the 5 stars as your zone characters. So here are my thoughts of this particular banner. We have to consider 3 areas, and that will help determine whether or not you should or should not summon on this one. And of course, feel free to leave comments below if you agree or disagree with my thoughts, and whether or not you're summoning on this as well. So first of all, we're going to talk about adding to the team. So keep in mind that adding to the team means either in terms of damage, support, in the case of zone characters, remember that they support all 3 other frontline units. Zones can also be used to extend the AF. And remember that zones can reduce the opposite element by 50% damage. And that also stacks to a lesser extent with diminishing returns such as Aurora Force. So you have 2 shielding at once, really reduces the damage. Now the second point we're talking about is going to be the so-called return on invested capital or return on chronostones, especially for us as free-to-play players. And finally, we'll talk about the mechanics and future-proofing of your account moving forward. So back to point number 1 about adding to the team. So keep in mind that depending on which zones you already have, if you don't have a particular zone, that means you're losing that access to the DPS of that particular character. Each zone character is actually, in terms of creating their own DPS, is on par with a lot of other strong characters, not to mention the additional abilities of establishing zone. Remember that all zone characters have support and utility because, when you're using other fire characters, for example, with it, or other of that same element, you're going to really boost that damage to an extent that you can't do with any other person's VC or even any other kind of moves, right? So, for example, AS Garyu, at the end of each turn, depending on every fire move you use, it boosts, I think it's int, right? By a certain percentage. And for example, in Mayumpha's case, of course, it doesn't do damage, it does support. It increases max AP as well as healing at the end of each turn depending on how many earth moves. So this is something that, other characters can only do partially. Remember that zone characters have all 3 of those. DPS, support, as well as the last one, which is AF extender. So remember that when you're in zone, any zone element hit increases your AF bar by 7.5%, whereas a normal unboosted hit is 1.5%, and a weak hit is 3.5%. So in some cases where you do a 2 or 3 times hit, you might get a slightly better boost in bar, but zone helps really with those single target DPS that are elemental. So you can really extend your AF bar, extend the combo meter, and do tremendous amounts of damage. I'm sure all of you have at least one zone character that you've tried that, and you realize that, you really can't build your bar any other way as quickly as with a zone unit. Now, remember that prior to having zone characters, any sweet 5-star has usually one cool VC, usually one support move that boosts all other characters, or just a super killer finisher. Or even a type shield, like original Garyu has its wind shield, right? Now with a zone, you get all of those. DPS, support, healing in some cases, and shielding. Unbelievable units. Now, in terms of, our return of, our cost and invested free-to-play stones, you have to remember that usually one strong character, if you add it to your team, so any 5-star you're going to summon for, it will do one of the 3 things we're looking for, which is really increasing your damage a lot, usually a pure support or healer, or it unlocks a unique skill or mechanic that you can't get with any other unit. Normally, if you think about even the most powerful characters we have access to, AS Myers, for example, or AS Renry, you usually can only get 1 or 2 of those areas at best, not usually all 3. Now, for those who are wondering, how many zones do I have to have access to really summon on this banner? And the answer is, really depends on your team makeup, how many other units of each element you have, and so on and so forth. So my general rule is, if you have at least 2 out of the 4 elemental zones, and that includes zones you can farm. So for example, everyone should have access to AS Garyu, or if you haven't gotten that far in the game, you will have access to Fire Zone. So Hardy is obviously a luxury item, for example. In the case of wind and earth and all those, if you have at least one other one, even Annabelle, a lot of us had free Annabelles from the most recent event, but if you join even later than that, you might not have it. But if you do have Annabelle, for example, that's a guaranteed AS Annabelle if you farm enough treatises. And on average, keep in mind that to farm 3 of one particular treatise based on RNG, around 3 to 6 months, maybe longer, and you'll have to buy 2 from the Siberia's Gems shop. I know waiting for zones, especially if you are farming treatises, can be very, very painful, but if you are, like for example, a minnow or a dolphin where you do have access to some paid stones, by all means, summon on this banner to fill out the holes in your account. But obviously, if you're free to play, you do have to really think about the long game where, there are very powerful characters coming out after this, especially after 2.5, where you see new kind of elements out there, a lunatic mechanic, and so on and so forth. If you summon all of them now, there is a high probability you will not have enough stones and or luck to hit one of those mega characters later on as well. So something to keep in mind. Now, back to what we're talking about regarding summoning on this banner. If you have like 2 or less zones, then obviously you really should fill out your team in that sense. Now, if you have more than that, then obviously this is really an optional banner where you are just kind of summoning either for more light or shadow, or just access to better versions of that. For example, if you have AS Claude and you want AS Vena, for example, if you want Hardy instead of AS Garyu, those are considered luxury items like I mentioned earlier, and really, as a free-to-play, you really should opt out of that. One general rule that my friend and I have really discussed when summoning on banners is consider pulling on a banner if at least half the units or half the rate ups is useful to you. So in the case of these 6 5-stars, if you really find that 3 or more of them are highly beneficial to you, and this depends on what we talked about earlier, then feel free to. And keep in mind, waifu and husbando is just as valid a reason as anything else. Now, our last topic, which was the mechanics and future proofing. Remember that we talked about, again, what the benefits of elemental zone characters are. Keep in mind that in terms of future content, they expect us to have access to zones when they create super bosses or even regular bosses. And so you will really want to have access to using zones as a strategy to either deal out massive damage or prevent some of the damage while you build up a fast AF and destroy the enemy. Keep in mind, so far, we have the foresight of knowing what's coming up in Japan, and this is the only banner that I can think of coming up that has access to all the zones. There is nothing of the sort that we know of in Japan. So all known elemental zone characters from Japan so far released are in this banner, and there are no other ones. Remember, zone characters aren't going to be replaced with your top DPS. You're going to have them as one of your top 4 for sure. And so if you have even 3 middling elemental characters, you can essentially make those characters super powerful by having the appropriate zone character. So something to keep in mind as well. So, and no one else can do unlocking zone other than zone characters too. So you have to remember, if you have powerful DPS characters, you might be able to sub one for the other. If you have no zone characters or missing a zone of that sort, you're in huge trouble if you're, like, for example, missing an earth zone and you really want to take on an enemy weak to earth and you can't manage to do enough DPS, for example. So at the end of the day, we are here to enjoy the game. If you are finding the content very difficult, and zones will definitely make a lot of those boss battles earlier, then that's another reason to summon on this banner. Because, we are here to enjoy the game, and saving stones would be great for ultra powerful characters going forward, but if you can't beat the current meta, that is all the antiquity horrors, some of the tougher optional bosses, then really, this would be a godsend to summon on this banner. So hopefully I wasn't too long-winded in talking about what my thoughts are on this banner. It's not as simple as saying yes or no to the banner, and hopefully some of my thoughts and process of deciding when to summon on a banner will go far in helping you decide for this one. Last thing, if you're wondering whether I'm planning to summon on the zone, no, I'm not. I do have access to every zone. I have 3 zones plus the slash zone, and I will farm for the treatises for Annabelle AS, so no, I'm holding out on this banner. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.